So finally, I got round to making my Baby Yoda, the child. And here's how I did. Well, so firstly, start off with a shape a bit like an oval, fairly firm. And then I just want to decide, I'm just going to sketch on it where I want the features to be. So roughly around the middle, slightly lower than the middle, I'm drawing the line for the eyes and then putting in where the nose and a little mouth's going to be. Big eyes and a little mouth. And I'll line up the centre of the eyes roughly with the end of the mouth. And to insert the eyes, these are glass eyes on a wire, and they are 10mm glass eyes. So I just repeatedly poke in the centre of where I want the wire to go in and feed the eyes in. Sometimes if I don't poke enough, it can't fit through there, so I need to poke a bit more. A spot of glue would work wonders to hold these in place, but because I'm adding loads of eyelids, I don't bother. So I've made 6 flat pieces. These are just a piece of felt that I've piece of fleece that I've folded in half and then felted along the end to make a firm end for eyelids basically. And I'm popping in, starting with the lower eyelids. If we look at the Baby Yoda picture, the inner corner of his eye is slightly lower than the outer, so that is how I'm popping this lower eyelid on. Now it is possible to use this eyelids method if you're using needle felted eyes. You just have to be super careful when you're felting on the eyes when you're felting on the eyelids that you don't felt into the eyes. It's much easier with glass eyes. I'm felting in the corners and then felting, just smoothing the top of the eyelids just onto the head. You want to make sure and felt all round so that the eyelids are nice and firm. And then we're going to make his jaw area, I suppose you'd call it. Muzzle, jaw, I'm not sure if he's humanoid or animal, but just into his... And underneath and between his eyes, you're felting a poof of fleece and just felting it till it's nice and smooth, adding more if needed. The jaws and the cheeks and the eyebrows are basically this way, a pinch of fleece and felting it into the shape that you want. Just looking back at his character picture so we can see he's got a bit of a chin, his tiny muzzle pops out, tiny mouth area sticks out a tiny bit, and then looking, his cheeks poof up from the side of his mouth. So I'm taking little bits of fleece. Remember, it's going to felt down way smaller, so think of taking a piece about 3 or 4 times the size that you need, popping it in place and just gently smoothing it on, felting away. You can squish bits with your fingers, hold them in the kind of place you want, and felt in with the needle, keeping the needle moving in all directions, and always remembering that the fleece felts in perpendicular to the direction that your needle's stabbing. So you've either got to move the direction of the needle or move the direction of the piece, as you can see I'm doing here, rotating it so that the needle's always going in perpendicular to where we want the surface to be. Always spend a bit of time not just focusing on the area you're working on, but I felt all around the whole head. Now if we look at his picture, well, this picture I just skated off, but he's kind of biting his bottom lip a bit, so I felt on the bottom lip first, fairly high up, about 3/4 of the way up this muzzle area. I'm felting his bottom lip. Now if you wanted an open mouth, you could felt his muzzle in black and then pop on his lips with a slight gap in between, and that would look like they're open. But just now Baby Yoda seems to be looking a little bit worried. He's slightly biting his lower lip. There's a slight downward curve to his mouth, but only slightly. So I'm overlapping this a little bit on the lower lid on the lower lip, and felting down in that ever so slightly curve down, and then where the mouth finishes and meets the cheek, it turns up just ever so slightly, so it's almost like a worried expression and a cheeky grin all in one. And when we're felting in sort of to the side of the muzzle, you can think like on your own face where you've kind of got that line between your nose and the side of your mouth. Cosmetic surgeons have a fancy name for it, but I can't remember what it's called. But just felting that in so his lip curves in 3D shape. It curves round and then poofs out for his cheeks. And add more fleece if you need at any point. So I decided that the cheeks needed more puffiness, so I just added some in there. And now we're going to be thinking about these eyebrow ridges. So feel them away for where the top of the eyeballs are, and taking some poofs of felt again and going right just past the tops of the eyebrows, thinking this is kind of like the eye socket, and felting a little eye ridge shape here. So I'm thinking of making sure that it's a fairly firm line between where the eyelid's going to be and where the top of the eyebrow ridge is. So felting up into that a little bit, and also working on going down, felting between the eyes down a wee bit at each side, so there's a kind of ridge where the nose is going to be. So you can see I've made this shape along the top of the eyelid. That's just felting away and pushing the poof of fleece forwards a little bit, manipulating it with my fingers. And basically the trick with this kind of sculptural piece is, if something's looking the way you want it to be looking, keep felting in, pinged away, keep felting in that direction. If it's not looking the way you want, add a bit more fleece, or cut a bit off if you need to, go in with scissors. And then once I get to this stage, I like to open the eyes. Don't know why, I like to have them looking at me when I'm stabbing them. So starting working away on the bottom eyelid, I'm felting it gently, manipulating it open, but at the same time I'm just gently felting a couple of mil below the eyelid to give little kind of eye bags. It's subtle in the picture, but it does add a little bit of cuteness. So back and forwards, creating a line just under the eyelid, and then felting down the eyelid. I'm not actually touching the eyes themselves, just the eyelid, and that slowly opens it. And the same with the eyelid going up the way. In the picture, the outside of his eyelids are more widely open than the inside, so I'm trying to do this, but I had felted my eyelids a little bit stiff, so the whole thing kind of opens a little. And just felt it open as wide as you want. It can be kind of cute to have the eyes shut a little bit. Any kind of expression, you can make that with how wide or what angle you create with the eyelids. I'm just trying to make his kind of innocently wide-eyed. And then I'm working more on this eye ridge by felting in just behind it and just felting a line there. Now this is the nose. Now the nose is so tiny, so it's a tiny bit of fleece, and I want a triangle shape. So if you pinch your thumb and first two fingers together, you do make a kind of triangle shape, but be super careful here felting this. But you want something absolutely tiny, and felting it on just at the beginning of where his muzzle starts to poof out a little bit. And as you can see, it's utterly tiny. It's too little for me to be able to really actually felt nostrils into it. Now I'm looking at doing his ears, and I'm using the wonderful eco pads from the makers, and all I do is cut a couple of lengths of pipe cleaner to the length I want, and they're going to be the top of his ears. Fold over at the end so there's no stabby bits, and then I'm going to wrap that in a little bit of white fleece, and then layer on some white fleece on top and underneath, and felt it into the shape that I want. Now unfortunately my camera kind of packed in quite soon, so you don't see the whole of me sitting felting ears, but this is the beginning. This shows you enough, is just literally getting the basic shape. And you literally just felt. When you're on a felting mat, always remember to pick the piece up and move it around, felt at it from all different angles. But I'm just taking a fairly thick wisp of fleece and felting at the top of the wire, and then felting in the rough shape that I want the ears to be. You can see I'm actually felting this into the felt pad so it sticks there a bit. Do the same on both ears. You could make a paper template for this and then fold over and felt in the center. Now this is the point I was going to make the body, and I suddenly realized there was something I wasn't sure about Yoda, so we've got to ask for help.
Hey Google, how many fingers does Baby Yoda have?
3. According to Wikipedia, fandom. Because of their 3 fingers on each hand and 3 toes on each foot, some have called Yoda's species a tridactyl.
Thank you.
3 fingers, I thought so. Right, so now to make the skeleton for Yoda, I'm taking a couple of pieces of garden wire that are around 40 centimeters long. Just make it longer than you need it to be. And the first one I'm folding in half and twisting. If you're not sure about how to make my skeleton forms, the needle felted ballerina shows you how to do this. But I fold this down to where the shoulders are going to be, fold the ends up. The second piece I find where the center is, pop it over this wire, and then I'm going to take the two sides and roll them together a couple of times to make his shoulders. Of course, this is the point where it goes off camera because I'm concentrating, but you can see wound together you have 2 arms and then the body shape, and I just give a couple of twists in his waist to hold that together. And thinking of the size of his arms, I'm making them a little shorter because I want to make hands, and I know the hands are going to go way bigger than I anticipate, so just making folds where I want his wrists to end, so I've got a little place for grabbing for his hands. And then a little off-camera fiddling, fantastic. But I'm just folding in the ends of his hands and the ends of his wrists and chopping off the excess wire. In retrospect, I could have probably kept that excess wire to help me create the hands. I thought for some reason this silver wire that I had was softer than the green, so I started with this to try and make the hands with it, but as you'll see, I had quite a job. It was not bendy enough, and this was just a nightmare. It was not working. I've lost my pliers just now, so I couldn't bend it and everything, so I was trying with my hands, but it's literally so much firmer than the green wire, so that was a stupid idea. So I decided to go back to using the green wire because it's fairly flexible. Ideally, I would have liked an even finer wire to use for his fingers to be able to get nice delicate fingers, but yeah, that wasn't to happen. Sometimes you've just got to use what's lying about the place. But yeah, this is me finally decided, yay, go Pam, realised that no, I absolutely can't use that wire, so back to the green stuff, back to plan B. And it's super difficult to explain how you make the hands. Oh, silly me, I'm moving on to make the bottom. So I'm just folding in the ends of the wire to the length that I want his body to be, and you can't see this very well, but I'm rotating one piece forwards and one piece back, winding them together, so I've got a little circle of a base. There's no point making 2 legs for him because he's going to be covered in his little coat, and this helps him stand up easier. 2 legs are super difficult to balance. Right, obviously I decided to have a break from trying to do hands, and then I'm going to use the green wire to make some hands when I get round to it. And basically what you want to do, take pieces much longer than you think you're going to need, and I wind a little bit on the wrist just to hold it still, and then I'm going to start with the thumb. Thankfully we only have 3 fingers to make here. Even this is a little difficult, so wind once around the wrist and then pull out to the length I want the thumb, or did I go around twice? I went around twice. So wind round and then leave a loop the length and in the position you want the thumb to be. So that's about 1.5 centimeters, 2 centimeters. And then again wind back around the wrist. It's a bit fiddly because nothing's really holding it in place, but once I get everything all the wires in place, it's not so bad. And then leave a length for the finger, and then wind around the hand bit and leave a length for the finger, and then just close off the wrist again, give a quick wind round with the wire, so we have a very ugly bulky looking shape, but it doesn't matter because it's going to get covered in fleece. And then we're going to do try and get all the jaggy bits to be out of the way. I did for a minute try and twist and pinch this more into place with my little snips, but that's not a very delicate tool. So trying the exact same thing on the other hand, twisting around the wrist a couple of times and then twisting out for the thumb and the 2 fingers. Working with wire at this scale is quite fiddly, and I would totally recommend you have at least 1 pair of pliers. It makes it a whole lot easier, but I managed with what I had. I'll have to find out where I put my pliers. And yeah, always making sure that the ends are folded over or tucked away. Twist them away and then snip them off with your pliers, anything that's sticking up, because the last thing you want is if someone's touching it and suddenly a bit of wire works out of the fleece and jabs them. Not pleasant. But basically we've got a little frame for Yoda, and it really helps us build the shape. You can make felted pieces without a wire base, just solidly of felt, and I did think about doing that, but I wanted to belt pose him slightly. It does make it a bit more fun. And that's just me trying to bend away the pokey out wires and snip off the excess. 10 points to anyone who finds the wee bit of wire that I snipped off in a minute. There's always tiny bits go missing. Okay. And then wrapping the fingers with just a tiny bit of fleece. I don't find I need any kind of tackiness or anything. Wind around the thumb and then round the palm of his hand a couple of times, because I want to separate the thumb from the 2 fingers. And then felt a little bit to hold it into place. And then the same on the other hand. Round the thumb, and then going to be a couple of wraps round the palm in between the fingers and the thumb, and this just separates them off a bit. And then going to dive in and do the 2 fingers, and this is a way to make hands. If you want, I do have other tutorials for how to needle felt hands without wire in them, which is a little bit easier. But here we go. That's fleece round the thumb and the 2 fingers, and you literally just felt it till it's nice and firm. Careful with the wire, but you get used to your needle sliding between the fleece and the wire. And then I'm just gonna wrap the fleece around the rest of his body just to hold it in place. We don't have to really worry about the shape of it too much, because his coat is going to hide everything. Goodness knows what kind of body, what length legs, anything he's got going on under there. But yeah, just plenty of fleece around. But basically all that's going to be seen is the tips of his fingers and possibly a little bit of his wrist. So you don't actually have to felt all this as firmly as I did, but I just like to do that. I like to make sure that what's underneath is firmly felted as well. You could get away with just wrapping a bit to pad it out if you wanted to, save a bit of time. Otherwise, I think I was about an hour. I put on a TV show and watched it and felted away while watching it. And the one thing that is best to make a bit firm, if you're felting the underside, make sure it's nice and flat, so keeping your needle perpendicular the whole time, felting it nice and flat, bending the wire, manipulating the wire, adding more fleece as needed until he's able to stand up. This is so much easier than trying to get 2 legs to stand up. But literally just add as much fleece as you want. This is core wool. It's carded white slivers from World of Wool. I find them a good price. They felt reasonably well, and yeah, it's good enough. So, and now finally we want to add his head, which I'm sorry, Baby Yoda. I'm just snipping a wee space up into the back of his head to pop his neck in. Wind a wee bit and then spend a lot of time smoothing the neck into the head, so that's all firmly felted. So there you go, that's another place that you have to make sure is all firmly felted. The neck, the hands and the base. So while you're doing all that, you might as well finish and felt him up like this. He looks like a very bizarre alien just now. So I guess we have to work on clothes for him. Oh, no, colour first, silly me. Yeah, because he is white and Baby Yoda's not supposed to be white. You want to be thankful that I cut the sound from this next bit. It is a horrible noise. But just in an old discarded lid and an old knife, I just like to scrape off little bits of the colour, scrape off little bits of some of these soft pastels into the colours that I want. It's better to get a mix of colours rather than just one colour, because then you can totally get the shades you want, the depth of colour that you want. So I'm just picking some greens, some greeny browns, a little bit of blues, some whites, some beiges, everything that I think I see in his colour, and building up a massive stack of green. You want to make sure that you've got more than you think you need, because the worst thing is to run out halfway through and you're never going to blend the exact same colour twice in a row. So yeah, make sure you've got way more than you think you need. This is a little bit tedious. Now, I know people are going to ask me, just painting chalk onto the sculpture, does this not come off? What's fixing it in place? And yeah, the kind of really bad news is it does stick on. That's not a problem. It does stick on eventually. What you have to do once you've coloured him all in, then because the process of getting the chalk onto his skin fluffs him up a bit anyway, so I have to spend a good deal of time just felting over the surface again. And while you're doing that, you kind of even out the colour a bit, you get it all over your fingers, but you get off the worst of what's not stuck on him. So yeah, that felting process, be prepared, it's messy on your fingers. But here we go, just going to give him a little bath in the chalk, dunking him in, and I'm using an old paintbrush just to paint him all over. I am hopeful that I'm going to get him in frame at some point soon. Really good at this filming business. There we go. So I'm going all over his head, every nook and cranny. I'm leaving a little bit of his ears blank just now. You'll see why in a minute. But just really trying to get tons of chalk on. This is a slightly time-consuming process, but this is a great way if you've got a weird colour you've got to make that you don't have fleece for, or you can't get fleece in quite the colour you want. You can colour your sculptures with some chalk. So yeah, here we go. Just trying to make sure it's not patchy, and you do that by putting on an excess and being aware that that excess is going to come off all over your fingers. But it's handy with a little sculpture like this. I can dunk him in, I don't even know what this was a lid from. It's now my pastel, it's my chalk collecting lid, and yeah, I just fill it up with colour, dunk your thing over the top and paint it all over. To start with, it does look like it's going to be horrible and patchy, and it's not going to work at all, but dab on extra, keep on going with extra colour, and it will eventually smooth out. And then when you come in and felt over it again, your fingers rubbing over it, the friction and the felting does smooth out the colour a whole lot too. And so that's his hands and his face. That's all that needs doing there. Now his ears and his cheeks and a little bit on his lips are actually a tiny bit shaded pink and red, so I just thought that would kind of look cute to add that, and just to show you that you can shade with chalks as well. It's a little bit clumsy, you don't get the most wonderful of shadings, but it does the job. So just get on, dab the extra colours, the pink and the red where you want them, and then start blending that with the green chalk, so it just looks like a flush beneath his skin. And again, trying to get rid of all that patchiness. It looks terrible just now. I promise you, it kind of gets better. And I just want to remind you, I'm happy if anyone wants to make their own little Baby Yoda from my rough little tutorial here, but a reminder that we can't sell these. It's kind of a grey area. Fan art, yeah, Disney's unlikely to come after us, but we can't sell these items. This is just for me. It was a little fun project that I wanted to make. I love Baby Yoda and this challenges my skills. This is not going to be for sale anywhere. Okay, so that's him all coloured for now. Like I say, I go away. I felt I use his bum to clean up the extra chalk on the table. I felt him all over, and this is the result. And you can see the little green shading over the body. That's just from my fingers touching everything. So don't use chalks to shade if you want some nice pretty clean colours elsewhere. Now I'm going to try and make his coat, and all I'm doing here is making a very rough pattern out of paper. Basically, I know nothing about needlework really. I'm just making a load of rectangles. A big rectangle for his back, 2 rectangles for his front for the overlap of the coat, and then a rectangle for each of his sleeves. The top of his coat is a little too thick, so this would have been better off if I'd tapered the tops, but I didn't. And yeah, so for the front, just making the... Oh, we're doing the arms now, silly me. Yeah, so just trying to get the size of a rectangle I want that goes round his arms, and I want it just so his hands are poking out, so that looks about the right length. And I have some pre-felt in a kind of lovely browny colour, and I'm just going to cut out the pieces I need for that. And it doesn't have to be perfect because there's going to be a bit of felting going on here too. So that's the back, and then for the front, yeah, I'm just going to cut this slightly longer and cut it into 2 pieces so that it wraps over, as fastens as a coat, and then making the sleeves, which handily enough are just half the width of what the coat is, so that was handy. And then basically once you've got these pieces, it's better to cut them too big, so they're going to be a bit too big, and I just trim them as I need them. So yeah, sleeves on first of all, and I'm just gently, I could have sewed this on, but I'm just gently felting the one piece, the one edge into the other. I'm not felting it into his arm, this is kind of loose on him, but just through one side onto the other, that felts it on. And yeah, so trying to put the seam facing down so it's not even seen too much. I'm just popping on his 2 arms like this. Now you can do as much detail or as little detail as you want at this stage. I try and include the look of some seams, and definitely the front seam and that iconic large collar scarfy bit. I like to think that it's an oversized coat, so that's a massive collar designed for someone way bigger than him, and that's why it's so big, because he wasn't expected to be part of the Mandalorian's crew. It was all an accident, so nobody had any clothes for him, so I think he just got something oversized, and he's turned up the sleeves, and he's turned down the collar, and it's supposed to be a coat for a human size, so it reaches the floor for him. That's my thinking. I don't think it's ever been, well, I haven't watched the last few of The Mandalorian yet, so I don't know if I'm just making that up. I probably am. And as you can see, just trimming the coat so it fits him, wrapping it round, keeping it nice, rough and ready, but felting down a straight line here and folding it back to make that, well, it's the button area. I'm not a seamstress, I don't know what it's called, the buttony area. Felting that up and down there, just felting on in place where I feel I need to, trying to make sure that the seams are joined. And this is what I mean, I should have tapered the back. It's puffing out way too much, that annoyed me. So the wonderfulness about pre-felt here, I can just snip it off and then felt that closed, and it works. I could have made the coat even bigger, to be honest. It really is oversized. This is where I got the idea that it's somebody else's coat. You can just gently kind of felt creases and bumfuls and poofy out bits into it to make it look a bit big. And then I'm just seeing if I could use any of the scraps for the turn-ups of his sleeves, but I have to cut a new piece here. So just cutting big chunky bits to wrap wrap around the base of his sleeves again. I'm just going to felt them in place. Again, I assume it's just oversized sleeves that he's turned up. I would love to hear what the creators of him were thinking when they made it, if they make up the little stories in their head. I'm sure it's all quite detailed, and I would love to hear all that. I'll have to dig out and see if there's any stories on that, any videos about how it's done. But as you can see, just adding that extra tube round the end of his coat looks kind of cute. It definitely does look like he's turned up the sleeves. You could just make the sleeves oversized and turn them up, but that would be quite fiddly at this kind of scale, so it's easier to put an extra cuff on. And the final bit to his coat is going to have to be this. It looks like a scarf, must be a giant collar is the only way I can think of it. But it does seem, there seems to be more bits. I'm not quite sure how it all works because there's 3 lips happening at the front, so I couldn't quite figure out what was going on here, but I just cut something oversized, popped it on, cut it where I needed so it wasn't too crazy, and just made it look a bit like a scarf, and then felted it in place. And then once that was done, we're pretty much done here, and I was super happy with how he turned out. But I just remembered an iconic part of the show so far that I thought it would be cool to recreate just by adding one little extra prop. So tell me, just what's your favourite bit of the Mandalorian? What bit springs to mind that you would like to recreate? But I decided just the point where he was, well, that you've all seen in the meme now, where he's standing holding the bowl, looking up over the bowl as he's just seen the Mandalorian in a massive fight lying on the floor. Because of course he was left and he was told to stay in the pub, cafe, whatever place. He was told to stay put, but he never does stay where he's put, quite like any other toddler. But I decided just out of brown fleece I would make a bit of a bowl, and thankfully because his arms and his fingers are on wire, then he's able to hold the bowl. Just again, like with anything, adding fleece if you want it to be a bit bigger. I never get the size right first time. I always add fleece. It's no bad thing. And just making like a dome shape and then felting inside it the opposite of a dome, cavernishly shaped, to make a kind of bowl shape. You could also just make like a semicircle, a half bowl, and then felt in a dent, or even just felt in a circle of different coloured stuff to make it look like there's some liquid in the bowl. Not entirely sure what he was drinking, so yeah, I don't know what colours it would be. And then his little hands are able to hold it, so it just looks like he's sipping, he's peering over his bowl, and that's it. That's our Baby Yoda. I hope you enjoyed, and if you make something like him, don't forget to share with us over on Pam Duthie's Crafty Friends. Yeah, I would love to see your Baby Yodas. Thank you so much.